All right, so get ready for a deep dive that's going to have us looking at language learning in a whole new light.
Hmm.
You submitted Barbie, the Barbie movie, as source material.
Okay.
And you might be thinking, what does a pink plastic paradise have to do with speaking better English?
Right.
Well, trust me, this is going to get interesting.
Yeah, this all comes down to a fascinating idea from language expert Dr. Julian Northbrook.
Okay.
He uses the strong reactions to the Barbie movie, the fact that people seem to either love it or hate it, to illustrate a really powerful concept for language learners.
Okay, I'm intrigued. It's definitely true that Barbie has been one of the most divisive films in recent memory.
Yeah,
There's practically no middle ground when it comes to people's opinions. Everyone seems to have a strong opinion one way or the other.
and that's exactly what Northbrook seizes upon.
Okay.
See, he argues that this strong polarized reaction, this love it or hate it phenomenon, can actually teach us something about how we approach language learning,
Right.
particularly when it comes to expressing ourselves authentically.
So you're saying it's not just about whether people liked the movie, but what those reactions reveal about how we approach things, even language.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Think about it. Have you ever noticed how some language learners are so afraid of making mistakes that they end up sounding a little robotic?
Oh, totally. Like they're so focused on getting the grammar perfect that they lose that spark of personality.
Yeah.
They end up sounding like a textbook instead of a real relatable person.
And that's where Northbrook draws the parallel to Barbie.
Okay.
He says, why aim to be like a lukewarm cup of tea? Inoffensive, but utterly forgettable, when you can be bold, vibrant, and leave a lasting impression.
He's saying it's better to be memorable even if some people aren't crazy about your style. I like that.
Exactly. He argues that many language learners fall into this trap of desperately wanting everyone to like them,
Right.
which can lead to suppressing those quirks and unique perspectives that make them interesting in the first place.
So how do we avoid becoming the linguistic equivalent of lukewarm tea? What does it look like to be bold and memorable in the way we speak English? Let's unpack that in the next part of our deep dive.
It's like that old saying,
Okay.
it's better to be a first-rate version of yourself than a second-rate version of someone else.
Okay.
And that applies to language, too.
Okay. I love that. So how do we actually put this into practice when it comes to speaking English? How do we go from beige to bold? What are the practical steps?
Well, this is where Northbrook's insight gets really practical.
Okay.
He says, imagine taking all those things that make you you,
Yeah.
your sense of humor, your
Yeah.
cultural background, the rhythm of your first language, and weaving them into your English.
So instead of seeing those things as obstacles or like mistakes to be ironed out, we should see them as strengths to be celebrated.
Exactly. He argues that these nuances can actually make your English more interesting, more engaging.
Okay.
Because let's face it, nobody wants to listen to a robot drone on in perfect English, right?
No, that sounds incredibly boring.
Right. But when you embrace your unique voice, it's like adding spices to a dish. It becomes more flavorful, more memorable.
So in a way, it's about being brave enough to be vulnerable, to let those little imperfections shine through.
Absolutely. It takes courage to be yourself, especially when you're speaking a second language.
Right.
But think about it this way. Would you rather have a few people deeply connect with the real you, or have a room full of people who barely remember you 5 minutes later?
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Quality over quantity when it comes to connections.
Yeah.
So by being ourselves, by not being afraid to let our personalities come through in our English, we're actually more likely to have those genuine, memorable interactions.
Precisely. And you know what? When you're not so worried about being perfect, language learning actually becomes more fun.
Oh, yeah.
It's no longer about striving for some unattainable ideal, but about expressing who you always are. It's about owning your story and sharing it with the world in your own unique way.
It's funny because the Barbie movie itself is a great example of that, isn't it? It definitely takes some risks, and not everyone loved it, but it sparked a lot of important conversations.
Exactly. And that's what we can learn from it.
Okay.
Just like Barbie embraced its bold vision, we can embrace our own unique voices in English.
This has been so eye-opening. So to sum it up for our listeners, how can they apply this Barbie wisdom to their own language learning journeys? Let's dive into that final thought next. So for everyone listening who's ready to ditch the beige English and unleash their inner bold, what's the key takeaway here? What should they focus on?
Well, I think Northbrook's message is incredibly empowering. He's basically saying, you are interesting, your experiences are valuable, and your English should reflect that.
Yeah.
Don't try to sound like someone you're not.
It's like he's giving you permission to be your most authentic self, even if that means making a few mistakes along the way, because those so-called mistakes are often what make you memorable and interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes we get so caught up in trying to sound perfect that we forget that language is ultimately about connection
Right.
and what helps us connect with others more than anything else, seeing their genuine selves shine through.
It's so true. When someone is comfortable enough to be themselves, flaws and all, it makes them so much more relatable and engaging. It's like those little imperfections are what make the conversation interesting.
Absolutely. Think back to a conversation you've had recently that really stuck with you.
Hmm.
I bet it wasn't because the person spoke perfect English, but because they shared something genuine and unique.
Oh, absolutely. Like you said earlier, it's about quality over quantity.
Yeah.
I'd much rather have a few deep, meaningful conversations than a bunch of superficial ones where I'm trying too hard to impress.
And isn't that what language learning should be about? Building connections, sharing experiences, and expressing yourself authentically.
Totally. This entire deep dive has been such a refreshing take on language learning. It's not about striving for some unattainable standard of perfection, but about embracing your individuality and letting that shine through in how you communicate.
Precisely. So for those listening, here's a thought-provoking question to consider. If your English could be reviewed like the Barbie film, would it be seen as bold, daring, and full of personality, or would it be just another forgettable middle-of-the-road experience?
That's such a great point to end on. I know I'm going to be thinking about that. And who knows, maybe a few grammar mistakes sprinkled here and there are just the things to make your English stand out from the crowd.
Exactly. Embrace those imperfections. Celebrate your unique voice. And go out there and have some bold, authentic, and unforgettable conversations in English.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. If you'd like to explore these ideas further or suggest topics for future episodes, you can find us on platform at username. Until next time.